Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this last session for this week for our gardening at week 2024. My name is Christian Acosta, agriculture educator from Cornell Cooperative Extension, Allegany County, and I'm happy to be here. And today it's our last session. So this week we were talking and learning about soil, about plant propagation, about controlling pests, and also indoor gardening, indoor house plants. And now we're going to be talking about herbs, how to produce our own herbs at home. And let's go for it. So, producing your own herbs at home. And as always, I say, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute your microphone or in the chat, you can send your questions. So we're gonna be learning today about getting ready to start our own herbs at home, the requirements for these plants, some good cultural practices, harvesting your own herbs, and how to process and use your own herbs. So let's start. So why we want to grow our own herbs? Probably because we just want something growing around the house. It can be out in the garden, it can be indoors. So something nice with the herbs is that they are very easy to grow, so they don't require a lot of space. And also we can be saving money. Uh, they are usually hardy ones. You don't need to be uh, putting anything extra there, like a lot of fertilizer and checking the parameters every single day. No, it's most of these ones they are hardy ones. So that's nice. They are easy to grow. And when I say we can save some money, it's not only because they are low maintenance, also because um, sometimes, especially during the winter time, the cold months of the year, sometimes no herbs, nothing outside because you cannot grow anything out there. And for some reason, you need some basil, some rosemary, some herbs. And I don't know if this happened at some point to you. You go to the store and then it's like a tiny box, and it can be $5, $7 for just a tiny box with rosemary, with basil, with some herb. So it's expensive, right? When we can have that at home and have way more than that for just a couple cents and almost for free. Because once you start or once you get some seeds, you can have herbs for a long time. So that's something nice. Some of the benefits of growing our own herbs at home. We can start growing all year round, anytime, because indoor conditions they still grow happy and healthy. So it's nice also because when you have a salad or any dish that you are making, and then you go and grab some fresh herbs, you can feel that you can taste the difference compared with something that has been in the store for a couple days. Um, or you can be making your own herbs to dry and then have your spices. So that's something nice. And also, if you're a gardener and you cannot be growing anything outside because it's too cold during the winter, so herbs you can keep growing your herbs at home and do something fun with the plants. So, if you are new with the herbs in your state, so we have, of course, a lot of herbs around the world, but the easy ones that you can start, and also that they are adapted to this this environment, is these ones that we can see here. So basil, oregano, mint. Sage is one of the ones that probably the easiest to grow. You don't need to do almost anything other than water the sage. It grows very easy. Same with thyme, lavender. Well, lavender sometimes is challenging for some, like especially soil conditions. Chamomile, dill, parsley, and rosemary. So for these areas, of course, we can have more than this. So we can have, for example, lemongrass. For this example about lemongrass, is one of the plants that they are more tropical areas. It likes heat, likes that hot environment. So here we can grow, but it's not gonna produce a lot in the same quality than down in Florida, California, in Mexico, in hot areas, for this reason. So, um, this with these ones, you can start successfully and start growing your green thumbs with herbs at home. So when to start? Because that's the question. Sometimes like, it's too cold. It's so. If you are planning to start your own herbs, for example, the basil, the rosemary for the season, in that case, I mean, to start indoors and then taking that outdoors, so the best month to start is about February or March, just in average. You can start indoors before the last frost. So you can start February, March, and start growing your herbs. And then when the temperatures are like these, like the night temperatures are like these ones. So here we have our examples with the lower, the minimum temperatures. So for example, for basil, you're growing your basil indoors. So when is the time to move that outside to the garden? When the night temperatures is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit or above that. Um, Same with the oregano. There are some of these herbs that they are frost tolerant, so they are not really like dying if there is a frost or a lower temperature one of those nights when you take them out. For example, mint, sage, thyme, lavender, that they can tolerate even, for example, sage about 30 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see that once sage is established in the garden, uh, you can leave the sage there for years and nothing happened because it's frost tolerant, so it can overwinter. So no problem with the sage. Of course, if the plant is too small, sometimes, yeah, it's reported that it can tolerate 30 degrees Fahrenheit or a little less sometimes. But if the plant is just too small, it's just a seedling, in that case, well, it's not that strong. So you need to bring that indoors or cover the plant with a plastic bottle or something that to provide some protection around the plant. Only when they are small and they are seedlings. And so when the te night temperatures reaches that, so here you can see the example. So whatever you want to be growing, read, consult about the minimum temperatures, and these temperatures are night temperatures because we know that they are lower, right? So that's the best time to be moving the plants outside. But if you want to do it indoors, so you can start any week, any day of the year, because if you keep the plants indoors, so you can be growing them anytime, not only if starting the seeds in February. It just that if you start, for example, in February, for example, March, or before that, for example, November, December. So it's gonna be a little cold, right? And they are not gonna grow that fast. Like right now, for example, if you see your herbs, they are growing a lot. And so that's the only difference. They don't grow that fast, but indoor conditions, they grow any time of the year. So now, preparing the space. So where to put our herbs? Because sometimes the advice, we don't hear the advice of start small and we can plant a lot of the seeds. And then we have tons of basil, tons of rosemary, and a lot of plants. And like, okay, now what? And some people find it a little hard to be getting some of the plants out, and they feel like they are killing those plants and that they can save them somewhere else, and having that hard time just cutting, thinning some of the plants, the seedlings that they are growing. So because of that, so start small and then you can be growing more herbs, especially if it's indoors, right? Because they can be big. For example, basil, we can have some small plants like this, just in a small pot. But if the temperature is perfect, you have light or some growing lights, and everything is perfect about temperature, about water, about humidity, you can have, so, well, it depends also the variety of the basil. You can have a big bush of basil, which is nice. You can be harvesting a lot. So that's why where to start. So these are not herbs, of course, but the example about the bottle, how you can be recycling some material, like the same bottles, the same containers that you where you get water or juice. You can cut that and open some holes on the bottom, and you can see that it's that simple because herbs, most of them, they don't grow a lot of roots. So that's what something nice. That's why you can use some bottles, some small containers, the yogurt containers, like basically anything that you want. Um, because they can grow pretty easy and very easy in most containers. Even there are some ideas. You can go even in Pinterest and see some ideas for the outdoor layout for the herbs. Recycling, for example, the tires from the cars. So people paint that one and in just uh, that tire, opening some holes there for drainage, they are growing some herbs in there, just hanging out there in the garden, and it looks beautiful. It looks nice. And if you have kids, so that's a nice project that you can be, all of you can be working together. And also you can go just for the store and get in any pot. So no picky about pots. You can use clay, and you can use the glazed ones. You can use any pots that you want. Um, well, something about pots. If you have some of these pots, or like it's mostly like a cup because no holes the bottom. So in that case, you need to reduce watering, right? Because even if it looks dry, so the water can be there at the bottom of the container. So always is better something with good drainage, so you don't overwater. And if you're even doing it outdoors, so be careful with some of the herbs because, for example, mint, any mint, so peppermint, spearmint, just mint in general, it's better to do it with pots and not planting the mint directly in the soil in the garden. Because sometimes it's like, okay, the gardening season is over, or you, for some reason, you leave the garden, you're not there every day, well, for different reasons. Um, the mint, it keeps growing and it becomes invasive. So that's an invasive plant. So that's why it's nice and also it's beautiful and smells so good and multiple benefits, but it's necessary even outdoors to have that in pots or if it's directly in the soil. So just keep an eye on that one. And every time that it's creating, is growing some of these runners. So keep spraying so you can spreading so you can cut those ones and keep the plant there under control. Because if not, it's invasive. And that's yeah, that's basically with the mint. Because I'm thinking, yeah, that's probably the only invasive. Other than that, basil, rosemary, you don't have problems if you keep them directly in the soil. And the substrate you can use for indoors. We can be using mostly potting mix. It's like easy instead of taking soil from the garden. If you're taking soil from the garden, just make sure that your soil it has a nice texture because sometimes, for example, my the soil in my garden is mostly is sandy. So if I use that in a pot indoors, so I need to be watering very often because all the water goes away pretty fast. So with the potting mix, we have that benefit that it retains water there for longer time. And now you can find commercially out there some potting mix that um, I don't remember exactly the what is the compound that it has in there, but it retains water for even longer time. So in that case, when you forget about watering the plants, that can be one option. If not, you can be using your own mix. So just an example, 1/3 of coco coir, 1/3 of compost, and 1/3 of perlite, and something that simple, mixing, put in some water, and that you can be using that for your plants. So now something that when you do your own substrate, you're risking a little bit about if, especially if you cannot measure your pH, because that is important too. So the pH for most of the herbs, it needs to be between 6 and 7.5. So it depends how well is the compost, like if it's well rotted, if it's a nice compost, the coco coir. Well, perlite is usually just perlite. You get that from the store. But mostly about compost and coco coir. So the pH can be high or low. So in that case, you see that nothing is growing in there. So just if you can measure your pH, okay, make sure that is between 6 and 7.5. If not, you can just get the potting mix, especially if it's indoors, that's easier. Now about growing conditions, about sunlight, sorry. Um, a lot of light is not always the best for the plants. So, for example, if we place our herbs in a south-facing window and the day is a long day, so in that case, it's not the best. Sometimes you can see that the plant is not doing well, and it's like, but it's getting sun, fertilizer, water, the humidity is perfect, everything is perfect, and the plant is just not growing well. It's like they're yellow, and nope, and sometimes just die because the plants they can get stressed. So stressed by light. So in that case, they still need they have some minimum and maximum a range of light time, the hours of light. So in that case, we can see some of in this table, we can see some of the herbs that I was mentioning before, and, and the hours of direct light. So if you have your plants in they're close to the window. So just try to pay attention about how much light you're getting. In general, as you can see, 7 hours is perfect. So some of them can benefit from even 9 hours. But as you can see, that's like, okay, 9 hours stops because more than that, they are gonna get stressed, like too much light. And in the opposite, if it's just 5 hours of light or five, 4, or even just 1 hour of light and that's it, in that case, you will need some help with growing lights. And if you don't have any lights at all, you still can grow your herbs. So no problem about that. You can get some of the growing lights and that's it. Just when you get growing lights, just make sure to be reading a little bit about how close they need to be from the plant, because also with growing lights we can provide too much light, even if it's just 7 hours, but the light is just there very close to the plant. That can be stressful for the plant. So in that case, read, because each company of the growing lights they have their own parameters for the intensity of light. So in that case, make sure about following those instructions. Or sometimes the light is too far from the plant that is not really helping the plant to grow. About watering, that's something probably one of the number one reasons why we kill plants indoors. Um, and herbs, they are not the exception, even when they are hardy ones and they can forgive a lot, especially some dry periods of time. But when it's too much water, then we have some problems in there. So this is the best way to know about if it's necessary to water or not. So the first two examples, you put your finger in the soil about 2 inches. And if it's something like the example number one, example number two, so no, it's still wet, even if the surface is dry, but some there, like even the second inch is like this. So it's wet, it's still wet in there. So no need for watering. But if it's like this, you barely have some soil there in your finger. So that's dry. In that moment, it's like, okay, I need to water. There are some some of these devices that they are cheap. They usually less than, I don't know, probably 20 or less than $20 online, and you put those ones, and it tells you if it's moist, dry, or wet. And there are some fancy ones that even you can check from your phone with the app, and it's telling you, even send you the notification, it's time to water the plants. Um, it tells you everything, the humidity, the light, and if sometimes nutrients. So of course, these ones, they are a little more, little fancy. Of course, they are pricey sometimes. But probably in the future, same like before times, years ago, the growing lights, it was like, no, those are expensive, too expensive. And now we can find growing lights easy, even in the stores. They are selling the growing lights in the big stores there, and where you can find any light bulbs for the house. Now you can find also growing lights, or online. So now it's accessible. So now you can buy, and it's not that expensive. So hopefully in the future we also can um, be getting one of these devices, and not that expensive, right? Okay. So about how to propagate our plants. So that's one of the questions, because with plants, with herbs, we cannot always be growing the herb, like taking a piece of basil and putting in water or directly in the soil, and now it's gonna grow a new plant. It's not that easy. So with with mint, for example, you can be doing that with some garlic. Well, if well, sometimes garlic, it doesn't fall into the herb category, but if you're growing at indoors, sometimes okay, it can fall into this category. But well, that's a different example. But with most of the herbs, you cannot really do something like that, and it's easy just with starting with seeds, or the seedlings that you can buy from nurseries, from the greenhouses. When it's out of season, seeds is the best to start your plants, your herbs. So with herbs, it's not like I don't know, for example, some indeterminate tomato varieties that they can keep growing and growing and growing for months. For herbs, you need to be planting constantly. It depends the herbs. So, for example, basil, cilantro, parsley. Well, parsley is biennial. Um, but some of the herbs, you need to keep planting the seeds. So, for example, cilantro is one of these herbs that it grows, and that's it. It just have the life cycle, and it gets brown even. So sometimes people is like, I don't know what I'm doing, what am I doing wrong, and I'm killing my cilantro. So it's not your fault. It's just that that's the life cycle. So the temperature and everything can be perfect, but once it reaches the the height, and it's time to produce seeds, so it allows the plant allows itself to turn brown and like die, and now you get the seeds. So even if you're producing seeds, you need to allow the cilantro to be completely dry, like brown, completely brown. and then you harvest those seeds. So that's normal. No, you're not killing the plant. And in that case, if you want to keep growing cilantro, so you need to be planting more cilantro seeds. So some basil, some of these herbs, basil, cilantro, even sometimes it's from season to season. The mint, peppermint, any mint, they don't come back to life. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So in that case, you need to go and get new plants. So read about the life cycle of your plants. In that case, you know if you can be waiting for the plant to come back to life, especially outdoor in outdoor conditions. For example, basil, no, sage. You need to buy sage once. That's it, because it can overwinter and you can have sage for many years, so no problem about that. If it's basil, cilantro, so probably every season you need to start seeds or get the seedlings if you want to be growing indoors. Always read the labels, always read before starting your seeds. And if you have old seeds from 1 year, 2 years ago, in that case, you can start a seed germination test. So just with a damp paper towel and couple seeds, these are a lot here in this example, right? Just with about 10 seeds, that's it. You don't need more than that. In a zip top bag, you can put that in a zip top bag in a semi-shady area, not direct sunlight, not totally dark, and then waiting a couple days. So with the seeds, if after a couple days, you can see which ones are germinating, and if based on that, so you know more or less what is the percentage of the germination rate. So if, for example, you have 10 seeds in your seed germination test, and only five are germinating and growing. So in that case, you know that your seeds that you have from 1 year or 2 years ago, uh, you need double of the seeds to get the plants that you want. So you want 20 plants of basil. In that case, you will need more than that. Um, Something with basil is that also most of the basil seeds, they have a lower germination rate. So that's why read the labels, because sometimes you can see germination rate can be 80%, 70%. Some seeds, it depends, especially tropical, if you are bringing something from a different environment, it can be lower than that. So you need a lot of seeds to grow just couple plants. Um, and so talking about getting something from a different environment, it's better just to get something local, something that is adapted to the environment. Because if not, you need to make sure that you are providing the perfect temperature and the perfect conditions for that. And at some point that happened also to me. That happened to me at some point. I got the basil. I don't know exactly from where, but it was a different variety. And that year it didn't really grow. It wasn't really growing that much. It stayed just tiny, just couple inches and not growing really. Not happy, not healthy, nothing. And just getting something from local nurseries, some varieties, some material from local nurseries, different basils, basil plants growing a lot and producing a lot with same temperature, same water, same soil. So that can make the difference between a poor harvest or an abundant harvest. So that's why. And like I mentioned before, based on the plant, you can be growing even more plants. Be careful, like again, I want to mention again the mint. Be careful with mint because it can be pretty invasive. Now about nutrition. So fertilizing herbs, usually we don't hear it that much, right? Because they have a short life cycle. And usually if you're growing with potting mix, the potting mix, it has fertilizer in it. So you don't really need to apply fertilizer, at least for, I don't know, a couple months. Sometimes it depends. You can read the potting mix a container where the label, the bag, the box, etc. And you can see it fits for 9 months, for 6 months, for X number of months. So in that case, you don't need to add more fertilizer. If you're using the same potting mix after 1 year, 2 years, so in that case you need to add some fertilizer because you can see the plants that they are not growing green and flushy, beautiful. They are just mostly like small and yellow, like they are struggling. So in that case you can change that potting mix or add some fertilizer. And nowadays the companies, the brands, they are making us a little bit like lazy because we don't need really to do the math like before getting a fertilizer and okay, it's this percentage of nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and this is the dose. So for my indoor plants or for my herbs, I need to be doing this and doing the math. Now you can just go and get fertilizer like this, plant food for vegetables and herbs. So it's already done for you. The perfect ratio between nitrogen, potassium, and more nutrients, more elements in there. So in that case, you just need to follow the instructions, the label, the dosage, and everything. That's it. In general, this is a general advice about apply fertilizer every 2 to 4 weeks, but some of them they can be telling you fertilize every month or every 2 months. Like I mentioned with the potting mix, that it is telling you it feeds for 6 months, 9 months. So you know if you need or you don't need to be applying every 2 to 4 weeks or even every 6 weeks, etc. Just follow the instructions. And if you have small pots, and in that case, it's better to use the liquid fertilizers, and they get absorbed easily now, faster, especially for small ones, or if you have just few plants. So it's nice because you can add that to the water and be watering and fertilizing same time. You're not using the pellets because if it's a small container, a small pot, and you are putting the pellets there, the risk that one of these little balls, little pellets, touches the plant, it's higher, right? So and if they are in contact with the plant, so you can burn your plant for the ones with the pellets. So when it's a small, something indoors, the liquid ones, they are the best option. And and not everything is perfect. And like I always mention, it's like at some point we can be fighting with some organisms. It can be some insects or sometimes some diseases from our plants. So we can have something like the aphids, some mealybugs, some mites, some whiteflies. So the best way to avoid that, to control any pest, is with prevention, is before buying the plant. If you're starting indoors, so not much problem because you know your environment. But if you're buying the plants from the grocery store or from the nursery or a greenhouse, in that case, you need to be picky. I always mention be picky when you're buying your plants. So you can shake a little bit the plant, and if there are some white insects flying around, so probably are these guys, the white flies. And in that case, just avoid that. Don't buy those plants. Or if you can be checking everything, the leaves and the stems, and okay, it looks healthy. Okay, the you have lower risk. It doesn't mean that it's completely is safe, that it's completely healthy, because sometimes we cannot see the eggs. So I yesterday in the class yesterday I mentioned one of the examples with one of my orchids. So right now this one is in quarantine. And it's good that it's in quarantine because I noticed a lot of mealybugs. So when I bought that one, it was like healthy, like nothing was in there. And nothing was in there. And now I can see. that now I have some mealybugs, but it's good that I have only in this plant, so I can be treating the plant once I make sure that nothing is coming back, because you cannot really see the first stages of the insect. So you only see when you see the white spot there when they are adults. So in that case, because we cannot see the eggs and some of the initial like larva it depends the insect and the initial stages of these insects, it's better just to keep the plants and be picky when you're buying it, and also keep the plants like in a quarantine zone before moving to your kitchen garden or the shelf where you have your herbs, or if it's out to the garden, because then you can have just an infestation and bring some insects, some pests to healthy plants that we can have already at home. Uh, a healthy plant, it's a strong plant. So if you give your herbs the proper conditions, the temperature, the everything, humidity, temperature, water, even for herbs, you don't need, we are not talking much about humidity, right? It's usually about 40%, but even in low humidity environments, they can be a little forgiving about that. So it's not like, for example, the orchids that you need to make sure that is at least 50% humidity or higher, because if not, they start having problems, or they get weak based on the variety. So in that case, if you provide good potting mix, good temperature and water, light, no problem about that. They're gonna be strong, even if they have some of the insects, they are not really like weak and affected by some of the insects, and you can easily treat any pest that you can have. And if you have, for example, they are turning brown or yellow at the top of the plant, because it's normal that some of the herbs, some of the leaves, they turn yellow at the bottom of the plant. So that's normal. That's normal. But if they have some spots like brown, yellow, and then brown, and then only in one part of the plant and not in general, and then that spot, it keeps spraying around, spreading around with the next plants. Um, so in that case, it's like, oh, maybe we have some disease. So it's better when you see something like this, start removing the affected leaves or the affected plant. It's better to sacrifice one plant and not get a hot spot for diseases for the healthy plants around. And you can be just preventive. Prevention is the key. So be using some horticultural oil, insecticidal soap, or the neem oil. That's something nice that is a little stinky for especially indoors, but it's for a couple hours and then that's it. So you can provide that protection for your plants. And you need to spray just probably once every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks if you don't have anything already. So for example, for this one, I need to keep spraying with I'm using the neem oil until I stop seeing the mealybugs. And for commercial products, if you're using something even more toxic, in that case, if you're growing something indoors and you want to treat those plants with some pesticide, some insecticide, fungicide, a synthetic one, something chemical, in that case, take the plants outside and then follow the instructions, protect yourself, use some protective equipment, and then you can spray your plants, wait until it's completely dry in the smell and everything when it's safe to bring those ones indoors again. And the advice about do not water the plants at night, because that's the perfect environment, especially for fungi, for most of them, microorganisms. When it's dark and it's the water, the moisture is higher. Um, in that case, it's like, okay, it's the perfect moment for the spores to germinate and start a new disease on your plants. And something that sometimes is disappointing talking about diseases is the damping off. So that's a disease. It's a microorganism that causes that. So it's not your fault. It's not that you overwater or the seeds they were not in a good condition or anything like that. It's just that it's a microorganism. and and it produces that. So you see the seeds they are coming back, coming to life, growing, and we are happy about that. And like yes, finally. And then it can be in couple hours or one night to the next one. In just one day, for example, you can see the plants that they get really like it's like if something sucked all that nutrients and the water from this the that little stem and boop, it dies. So there's nothing to do about that. Just remove that one and that's it. It's pretty common and pretty normal. In that case, you can try, um, sorry, just with hydrogen peroxide, treating the soil. So dropping 1 milliliter of 3% peroxide into the soil for the usually is the trays, right? We can see that in the germination tray or container where you're growing your seeds. So you can spray that, water that with hydrogen peroxide. Um, in that case, just about 10%, like 90% water, 10% peroxide, and water with that mix. And it's not going to kill the plant or anything like that, but it's preventing some of the microorganisms in the soil to be growing and causing something like this. And usually, when you buy the seeds from the store, so not always, but some of the brands, they pre-treat they give a treatment for the seeds. So in that case, they apply some fungicide. So to avoid that, it doesn't mean that it's 100% that it's safe 100%. No. And also, if you want to treat your own seeds, you can use any product containing metalaxyl M, and that's for that specific damping off effect. No, the best part of all of this journey, growing our own herbs, and it's harvesting. That's like the most rewarding and the happy moment for most of us, right? When we can be harvesting and using our herbs for anything that we want. I'm gonna mention some of these options. And and that's it. It looks so simple, so easy. Just go and grab the herbs and that's it. But even in this moment, harvesting is when we can be causing a lot of damage to the plants, especially if we want to keep harvesting from that plant. So in that case, we can be harvesting a lot during the growing season. So right now we can be harvesting a lot and we can be removing, it's better to be removing the flowers and dead leaves that you have. For example, for basil, you see that they produce at some point they produce a lot of flowers. So if you want to be producing more leaves and harvesting the leaves, when you see the flowers coming, uh, pinch that flower, because once they start growing flowers, they stop or they reduce the production of the leaves and the natural oils and nutrients that start going to the flowers because the plant is getting ready to produce seeds. So in that case, if you don't want the flowers, you want more the basal leaves, so cut the flowers. And if you want the flowers for because you can probably the question is why I want the flowers. So for medicinal purposes, for example, about the flowers, basil flowers, you can use in that for to make a tea and drinking the tea with the basil flowers when you have like strong headaches, sometimes even for migraines, and that can be some nice tea to help with the migraines with really strong headaches. So that can be one of the use for that. Um, if not, go pinching the flowers. So you can be doing that. So you keep only the plant in green and beautiful, because at some point the yellow leaves, they are consuming resources from the plant, and you are not going to harvest that, right? What is the best time to be harvesting? Early in the morning. So um, not like 4 a.m. or something like that, but I mean just early, before noon. So 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., because it's not too hot yet, and the natural oils in the leaves, they are still there. Um, so that's why it's better. And it doesn't mean that you cannot harvest anytime at night or afternoon. But if you really start trying and feeling the tasting that difference, at some point you can tell like it's better the quality and the taste when they are being harvested in the morning and versus the afternoon or night. That's the best time to be harvesting. And so if you have some biennials, for example, some parsley is one of these examples, sage, in that case, stop harvesting during the fall. So when the cold time comes, the the fall, the winter. So in that case, allow the plant to have some of the the stems and some of these leaves and naturally those nutrients for the plant to survive that winter. Because if we cut more than 50% of the plant, we can be like killing the plant at some point. Is too weak. We need to allow the plant to recover and grow again. So if you want just one harvest and that's it, okay, you can harvest the everything, full and the whole plant. If not, allow the plant to recover. So about 30 to 50% you can be harvesting and allow the plant to recover. Because that's stressful. Of course, you're cutting a part of the plant. So it's a stressful moment for the plant and it needs to recover. And if you want to harvest the seeds, this example here that I see the cilantro, allow the plant to dry completely, be completely dry before getting the seeds, before harvesting the seeds. Um, Unless you want to use the fresh, like the seeds when they are still green for any dish or anything that you want, like on purpose to grow, to harvest the seeds when they are uh, green. So that's the best time about harvesting. And when you're cutting, so for example, about some of these plants that you can see, like basil and mint, cut very close to the leaves. So don't allow the plant to, I don't know if, no, I don't have the example here, that if I have, I cut the plant and then the leaves are down here and then there is a notch there without leaves, without anything. So that notch is not really doing anything and you just made a cut. So that's the perfect that's like opening the door for bacteria, for fungi to start growing there and causing any disease problems for the plants. So in that case, just cut really close to the next leaves so the plant can heal and keep growing. And also that promotes to even keep growing, keep getting bushier. And to preserve your herbs, so there are different methods. You can be drying the herbs because with herbs you can be it's a little challenging. You can be using them fresh. That's the best part, that you use it fresh. But if you want to save that, it's a little challenging to store the herbs fresh. So you can wrap those ones with a damp paper towel and put in the refrigerator, and that lasts a little bit longer, but just a couple days compared if you just put that in the refrigerator or out on the counter, right? Um, but it's not like for a long period of time. Freezing, is not really nice because when you thought that it's not really nice to be eating those herbs um, after being frozen. So in that case, it's not that nice. So it's a little challenging, right? So it's better just to dry the herbs, consume fresh, or do something with them, some sauce or anything like, for example, the pesto. It's with basil, and drying and storing in some mason jars, right? So we can have for cooking, for medicinal purposes, and we can be using our dehydrator. These are the cheaper ones. There are some bigger ones, nice with the trays and everything that you can use. The oven is not recommended because in that case it's too much heat. Unless your oven has this option about rehydrating, like it's a lower temperature, it's just probably 90, 100, 110 degrees Fahrenheit. In that case, you can put your herbs to dehydrate in the oven. If not, you can hang the herbs like this, but then sometimes you can have the uh, any bacteria or fungus growing in there, or insects, or just taking long time, taking too much, too long. In that case, to speed that faster, you can put your herbs if it's hanging, put your herbs with a paper bag and open some holes because you need air going into the paper bag. So because it's dry and it increases the temperature inside, um, that helps to dry the plant faster. Oh, also, there is a method, for example, with mint, if you're using mint mostly for tea or for the drinks, because that can be used for cocktails, for cold drinks, you can chop in that a little bit and put in the ice, like making ice cubes with that. And that's another way for mostly for drinks. And you can be using your herbs for many things, not only cooking, right? So medicinal purposes. So oils for drinking the tea. So we know that, for example, basil, it helps for headaches. The flowers of basil, it helps for stronger headaches. Rosemary, it helps for memory. So if you have if, for example, you need to learn about something you're studying or need to remember easier something that you want to remember, just having a little piece of rosemary and smelling that while you're studying, while you're reading, and just smelling that you need to eat, just smelling the rosemary, that helps you to remember easier, in that it's proven that it helps with memory. Um, there are usually for any problem that we have, there is an herb that we can be using. Oregano, when there is some um, ear infections, so the extract of the oregano, just put in the oregano and well, the oregano that we have in the US is different than, for example, the oregano that we have in Colombia, that is way bigger and the leaves are big. And in that case, um, we put that just on the pan, and then it becomes like watery. And that natural water from the oregano, it can go in the ear, and that helps for infections with the ear. And just there is a lot of uses with herbs that you can be treating yourself for many things. Like horsetail, it can be a weed, but you can grow that as an herb to for osteoporosis, for joints and bones. Yeah, but there are many examples. The mint, it's nice also for calming, relaxing, for stomach ache, any stomach problems. So we can be creating our own medicine. In that case, be careful about how much, because that's the risk for home remedies. That's why some home remedies, they are not like legally advised, because it's about how much and the reaction that you can have. So if you know your body and you start trying with some of the herbs, and and see if that really helps you or if you need to reduce this herb or using another one, etc. Also for skincare products, so we can mix that with oil, for example, making rosemary oil or any oil that we want. And for example, mixing the herbs like, well, we can use citronella, we can use mint, just to mix with alcohol. And after a couple of days, just spraying that. And it helps also with basil, like basil, rosemary, sage. Well, the sage is a little strong, that smell. Um, just with alcohol and using like a natural mosquito or insect repellent. For hair care, for example, rosemary, it's really nice for hair care. So putting rosemary in your shampoo and or some extract, rosemary extract for to strengthen your hair. So that's something that we can be talking more examples about how you can use for different purposes, medicinal purposes, for the herbs. Also natural perfume, so for meditation, relaxation, it's nice like the basil, and cooking, of course, that not that smell, as an air freshener. For example, the lavender, having the dry lavender in your pillow that helps you to relax and fall asleep easier. So there are many uses for your herbs, and there is like a plus, that satisfaction when you're growing your own herbs and you bring the dishes to the table, and it's like, oh yeah, that's the basil that I was growing for the lasagna, for the salad. This is pesto is with homegrown basil that I was doing that I was growing this season, and you know that is pesticide free, it's organic, it's by yourself, so it's even more rewarding when you are making your own herbs. So that's basically about uh, how to grow your herbs at home. And at this point, so if you have any questions that you have for this session, feel free to unmute your microphone or send it on the chat box. Well, if we don't have questions right now, yes, I don't see. Let me see in the chat. Okay. But at some point, sometimes we have some challenges or like, I'm not sure about this plant. Um, oh, okay. We have one here. So my basil turned yellow and did not grow. Any ideas why? This can be about the variety. So sometimes we buy that. That was something that happened even here locally about buying a basil plant. And I'm not mentioning the brand, but it was even a little pricier compared to a basil that I can get from the nursery. Uh, and it was like just because I was already there in the grocery store and I saw this pot and I was like, oh yeah, I need some basil. And I bought that one. I bought that one, and then it didn't grow. So there were no idea what variety it was, and it was the perfect environment and everything. With the same environment, I bought a basil from the nursery, and it was way bigger. So that can be one of the reasons. Reason number two is overwatering or when it's too dry. Basil is one of these I call the drama plants because if it's too dry, if it's dry, it doesn't like dry or too wet. That's the only thing that basil is a little picky. If you put too much water, if you're over watering, so it dies. It's like it turns yellow and die. And if it's dry, even for 1, 2 days, or even 3 days, being dry, so also it reaches that point where it's just wilting and not recovering even if you water again. Sometimes it just don't recover and it's like, no, I'm dying. So that's another reason. So it's sometimes it's picky mostly about water and hence the light. If you have like too much light, more than 10 hours of light, it's too much for the plant. If it's dark, like the kitchen, but it's not really having enough light, also it's not growing that happy. So that can be one of the reasons why. And rosemary. With rosemary, yeah, we can have that for more than a year, but not outdoors, not in outdoor conditions, because usually it doesn't tolerate more than, I think it is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Um, it's a little hardy, but not that hardy. So if you want to keep the rosemary for more than one season, you can bring that indoors. The thing is, when you change the like the temperature, humidity, and everything, the plant can also dry out completely. So in that case, yeah, you can be growing in that one for more than one season, but even for um, like the fresh of the plant, you can be getting that every year, every season. And just in case that you cannot bring that plant indoors, just when it's cold, too cold, just try to cover that one with a fabric or some protection for the plant, and see how it goes. Because it depends about here, even when it's not a big area, we still in Allegany County, Steuben County, we have microclimates, so it's different. Each garden it can be way different than the neighbor's garden. In that case, you need to try how that works for you. Sometimes it's not even your fault, it's just the temperature and the variety of the plant that it's not growing that happy and probably dies. More questions? Okay, uh, we are 3 minutes past 11, so I think if you have more questions, feel free to reach out at any time, any moment. And sometimes we don't know the answer, but we know someone who knows the answer for specifically any problem like pest control, trees, for fruits, for anything that you want. And it's even easier with the email that you can send also pictures and this is happening and anything, anytime. We're always happy to help. And thank you for being here. Thank you for being the ones being all the every for every class. The recording is gonna be available probably next week in the Horticultural CCE Allegany Horticultural YouTube channel. Just in case you want to share or come back to the material. And I will see you in a next event, a next class. Um, Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everybody. And I'll see you in one of the next events for Cornell Cooperative Extension. Have a wonderful day, wonderful weekend. Thank you. Bye bye.